Hello learners, I am Dr. Pratibha and I welcome you all to the second lecture on Unit 1, Starting and Ending Conversations from the course Begla 135, Greetings and Goodbyes. Let us briefly recall what we have already learnt in the previous video. We looked at what do we mean by conversation. We looked at greetings, their significance, examples and some basic rules. We also discussed topic selection and some tips for meaningful conversations. As by now you know that conversations, like stories, have three parts: beginning, middle and end. Not knowing how to start a conversation, how to keep a conversation going and how to end it can be detrimental to your social life. But if you know how to keep those words flowing, how to keep the conversations going with the people you meet and get to know, you can talk to pretty much anyone and everyone. This can create great opportunities and possibilities for you to strike friendships and collaborate with people. Continuing our discussion on conversations, in this video lecture, we will cover the following topics: how to keep the conversation going, how to end a conversation, and various ways of saying goodbye. Let's begin. Getting into a conversation is one thing, but continuing a conversation is quite another. There are socially accepted scripts of small talk that you can use to strike a conversation. You can ask, how do they like the weather? Or if you meet somebody at a party, you may ask them, how do they know the host? Or what do they do for fun? But once the conversation has started, how do you maintain it? Whatever be the length of the conversation, if the flow of conversation is to be maintained, the participants need to make it easy for each other and they need to collaborate. Some ways in which speakers collaborate to keep a conversation going are as follows: taking conversational turns, giving simultaneous verbal and non-verbal feedback, giving positive reinforcement, giving cues through accommodation, using tag questions, and using uptalk. Let us look at all of them one by one. Conversational turns. This is the most basic strategy to make a conversation successful. In this, you take turns to speak. In the example on the screen, you can see how Aman and Rima take turns to speak to each other and respond. Simultaneous verbal and non-verbal feedback. Successful conversations rely on simultaneous feedback. There is a wide range of vocalization which is involved if the conversation is going well. And these vocalizations are usually frequent. While one person is talking, the other maintains the flow of feedback responses to let the speaker know that the conversation is going well. This is especially useful if the speaker's turn is lengthy, such as when telling a short story. Simultaneous verbal feedbacks are usually supportive in characters, and they may sound like, yeah, really, wow. There are also some non-linguistic ones. For instance, somebody might laugh. There might also be an audible intake of breath. Or in terms of non-verbal feedback, one may shake their head or change the facial expression. One reason for not feeling confident or comfortable during conversations is that we do not get any feedback. Have you ever been in an interview where the interviewer listens to you in silence and gives no feedback or response? Did you feel a sort of discomfort? And did you feel relieved when what you were saying was given an affirming feedback? Don't we agree that feedbacks immediately boost our confidence? Consider a situation. A doctor and a patient are talking to each other. The simultaneous feedback by the doctor helps the patient to relax while he may be reporting his symptoms. Remember, lack of such feedback from people we are talking to can be a huge source of annoyance to some. Positive reinforcement. In English, there are some explicit expressions of praise that participants use when they are conversing. This indicates that the conversation is going well. Let us look at them. Some examples are, "That's right," or one may say, "That's a point." One could also say, "I quite agree with that," or "That's good." Or one may say, "I'm sure it does." Now, similarly, there are also some phrases to express disagreement during a conversation. Though if such instances arise where you have to disagree with someone, try to be intonationally gentle and self-effacing. You may use phrases like, "Oh, I do not know about that." "Really?" "Oh, come on." If during an interaction, instances of uncertainty arise or you feel some sort of doubt, you should ask for clarification. This can be done through deflected questions or questioning intonations. For example, you could say, "Is that what you mean?" "You know what I mean," and so on. Then, during conversations, participants also give cues through accommodation. People who are getting along well accommodate to each other's behavior through mirroring body posture. They may sit in a similar way or use some form of shared laughter. Sometimes people even tend to match a tone of voice. They may adopt similar levels of loudness of voice. Even their speech rate may match. It is commonly seen in people who know each other very well, where they tend to overlap the ends of each other's sentences through complementary speech. This is accommodation. Next, tag questions. What are tag questions? A tag question is a grammatical structure in which a declarative statement is altered by use of an added interrogative, which is called the tag. It is like a mini question. We use tag questions to ask for confirmation. They mean something like this: "Is that right?" Or when we use tag questions, the implied meaning is, "Do you agree with what has just been said?" They are very common in English. The use of tag questions, especially with the falling intonation, implies that the person is telling and not asking. The function is to make an offering of the utterance to the listener. It also indicates a sign of the desire for collaboration in the conversation. Look at the conversation between Aman and Reema on the screen. Aman asks, "It's a sure sign of failure, isn't it?" Reema responds, "Yes, it is." Uptalk. Sometimes people use high rising tone on statements. These are called uptalks. It is used as a comprehension check to see if the listener has understood. Look at the example on the screen. If I say, "I've been reading some Margaret Atwood," this means that I'm telling you. On the contrary, if I say, "I've been reading some Margaret Atwood," with a high rising tone, This implies that I'm asking if you know who Margaret Atwood is. Uptalk is equivalent of an unspoken question. It means you ask the listener, do you know what I'm talking about? If the listener knows, he or she might simply nod and let the speaker continue. In case the speaker does not know, the intonation offers the listener a chance to seek clarification. And usually, such statements or uptalk statements will be followed by a pause along with an appropriately questioning facial expression. Uptalk has an important social role. Therefore, it's an easy way of establishing social bonding and rapport. It shows that the speaker is thinking of the listener's needs and wants the listener to contribute. Uptalk became increasingly noticed during the late 1970s in New Zealand and Australia. It is also quite common in Celtic-speaking areas. It is strongly heard in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. If one uses uptalk, it is assumed that the person who is being spoken to. People generally use uptalks when they have a shared background. Finally, one may also keep the conversation going by developing a point. Finally, one can also contribute to the flow of conversation by developing a point. For instance, if a speaker says, sound pollution is an environmental problem, the speaker can take up the cue and expand the statement in response by saying something like, yes, it's an enormous problem and especially a problem where I live. One can also develop a point by reformulation. It is by introducing a related topic or a similar situation. In more thoughtful settings, the speaker can try to even plan ahead and make a point or two about what is being said. Sometimes it is also considered proper to seize the opportunity to speak if there is an appropriate gap in the conversation. And you can do this by saying the phrase like, that's the other thing I was going to say. Now, having understood how to continue the conversations, let us look at how to end a conversation. There are usually two types of endings within a conversation, implicit and explicit. It is the content that will often decide what type of ending it is. Example, a joke usually has a punchline that tells you that it has ended. A story will have some sort of climax. But what would you do if there are no intrinsic signposts within the phrases being spoken to identify whether one has reached the conversation or not? In situations where, unlike the joke or the story, when there are no intrinsic signposts, the fact that the speakers have reached the end of what they had to say on may need to be explicitly marked. Let us first look at some implicit moments that tell us that the conversation would soon end. Such moments may be lexically inexplicit or implicit. We sense a topic is coming to a close if the speaker noticeably slows down, lowers voice, or introduces a longer pause than normal. There may also be some non-linguistic cues in the form of facial expressions like pursed lips, looking away from other participants. Then there could also be body movements like shrug of the shoulders. Let us look at some explicit moments or phrases that indicate that the conversation would end soon. In formal settings, People sometimes draw attention directly to the moment by saying phrases like, "I have said enough about that. Let me move on." Or one may say, "So I suppose there's nothing more to be said." In more formal setting, people usually say words like "finally," "lastly," or such like that act as a signpost. Now let us consider some extrinsic markers in informal settings. In informal settings, the markers are more often indirect, sometimes even cliché. People use phrases like, "So it goes," "That's life." One may even say "so" with an elongated vowel sound. Now, let us consider some extrinsic markers in conversation between passengers-by who are expressing a desire for closure. When the conversation is between passers-by or strangers, a simple "must be going," "must get back to work," "gosh, look at the time," "have to run," "lovely chat," such phrases will suffice to indicate that there is a desire for closure. These may be accompanied by some non-linguistic behavior, such as looking at the watch. Now, once the speaker has expressed the desire to end the conversation, it is the listeners who then have to decide whether to respect the speaker's choice or continue the topic for themselves by breathing new life into it. Finally, we must consider a few tips to end a conversation politely. One should smile and try to be friendly when ending the conversation. This indicates to the other person that you have enjoyed the conversation and you are not ending it because you were annoyed. Try to make a positive comment before you mention that you need to go. Alternately, you could also give a reason for ending the conversation. Let us look at some ways of saying goodbye in English. As simple as it may seem, goodbye is at times used repetitively. Using bye-bye all the time is not appropriate. What are some alternatives that can be used in such a situation? The standard medium in formal situations. If you do not wish to say bye-bye, there are some alternatives that you can use. These are as follows. Goodbye is a standard way of finishing a conversation. In situations where you might be on a business phone call, or if you wish to express some extra level of politeness. One could say, "See you." One could also say, "I hope we have a chance to meet again." Such expressions are usually followed by an actual parting greeting, like bye. "See you later" is another expression that people use. Later here means later today. Sometimes people get confused while using this. "See you later" is about a time which is sooner than "see you soon," which means that the next meeting might not yet have been arranged. You might have also seen people saying, "See you sometime," "See you someday," "See you soon." Another expression to indicate parting is to say, "Bye for now." When you are parting ways with somebody at night, you can say good night. This is especially used at the end of the day or when someone is going to sleep. Another expression is "have a good one," "have fun." This expression can be used for giving good wishes before the final parting and are often used right at the end of the conversation. Another very common usage is take care. This is generally used in a difficult situation to express good wishes. And if you know that you might not be meeting the person again for a very long time, you can say so long or farewell. However, these are considered slightly old-fashioned. With this, we have reached the end of the video. On the screen, you can see some references that have been used to cull this lecture, and I recommend that you check these resources out. Also, do read your course module. I hope you enjoyed the lecture and have learned how to keep the conversations going and make them interesting. Thank you very much.